few weeks ago I gave a teisho based on, inspired by a New York Times op-ed piece, you remember, called Can We End the Meditation Madness? In which the author, Adam Grant, I think, was saying, look, all the benefits that you're getting, you say you're getting from meditation, reduced stress, more relaxation, I can get by other means, by diet and exercise, etc. Sleep, so stop laying a guilt trip on me for not meditating. And as you recall, I would totally agree with that. The type of Zen practice, you might remember I mentioned, corresponds to what Yasutani Roshi in the Three Pillars of Zen calls the very first of 5 levels, called Bampu Zen, which is just that level of, relaxation, etc., but which doesn't get very far. And you remember I quoted his final comments on that type, which were that the person basically remains in illusion about this basic nature, his true nature, her true nature, and in the illusion of separateness, they're being separate. Well, I'd like to explore a little more today in what it takes to go beyond that. Again, inspired by the New York Times, which last Friday, some of you may have seen it, David Brooks has an op-ed piece called Lady Gaga and the Life of Passion. Now, Lady Gaga, okay, certainly a passionate person. And by the way, whatever you think of them, I think that Lady Gaga, like Madonna, has a lot of her Catholic imagination and upbringing to thank for, the symbolic universe and the boldness, etc., that they inhabit. However, I'm not going to be basing my comments on Lady Gaga, but rather on what is said here about passion, the passion which I do think she exemplifies, but which all of us should exemplify in our lives. And there's some fascinating reflections here. So what does it sound like? What does it feel like, as she herself said, to be passionate? And one of the things he suggests is that I suppose people who live with passion start out with an especially intense desire to complete themselves. Now that ties into, in other words, find your true nature. We need passion for that kind of exploration. I think was William Butler Yeats who said, that it's the wicked who are full of passion and intensity. Meanwhile, the rest of us are sitting, in our, on a slow simmer, a low simmer in our lives. We're kind of sleepwalking through life, as the Buddhists would rightly point out, with a lot of, what Karl Rahner says is the greatest vice of our time, which, in spiritual terms, mediocrity. It's not engaged. It's not passionate. You need passion in order to live this kind of life and to discover then your true self. So we are the only animals, he said, who are naturally unfinished. So we need to discover and fulfill ourselves by discovering what our true nature is. That's one way of expressing it anyway. We have to bring ourselves to fulfillment, integration, and coherence. He says some people are seized by this task with a fierce longing. Some people seem to be awake to this. Maybe, is it almost even by temperament? I don't know. Maybe they are propelled by wounds that need urgent healing. Well, we all have the basic urgent wound and the 3 poisons and what we call original sin in Christianity. But some are more aware of that and personal trauma, etc. as well. By a fear of loneliness, or fragmentation, which that illusion of separateness. That we're separate, lonely, and fragmented, not connected. So it fits very well into this paradigm that we're speaking of. Maybe they're driven by a glorious fantasy to make a mark on the world. We'll come back to that in a second in terms of vocation. But they have a fervent curiosity about their inner natures. Yes, exactly. An unquenchable thirst to find some activity that they can pursue wholeheartedly, without reservation. So you can certainly apply that to our Zen practice, to life in general, and life and practice are the same thing in the end, of course. life is our practice, and our practice is life. But our practicing the practice, on the cushion. There are a couple of passages and stories that you may be familiar with from the Momonkan, particularly, that illustrate this passion in the pursuit of, the practice. The first one is the first one, the first koan, the koan mu that some of you know. And Mumon's own commentary, as you may recall, has this. So concentrate yourself, it says, into this mu, with your 360 bones and 84,000 pores. So every fiber of your being should be tingling with this dedication, should be engaged, your whole being. Making your whole body one great inquiry. Exactly. That's the great doubt that Hakuin speaks of. That, there's an inquiry. We know there's something more. We have to explore this, and we give ourselves fully to it. Day and night, work intently at it. Do not attempt nihilistic or dualistic interpretations, he says. Dualism, of course, that illusion of separateness, but not nihilism either. You can't enter this with cynicism. This is where the great faith that Hakuin also talks about comes in. The great doubt, there's something more that's needed. Life is dukkha, life's insufficient. We have to discover more, and more is there. But yes, trusting that more is there, according to the testimony of the masters and our own deeper instincts, I would hope. So he says, it is like having bolted a red-hot iron ball. It's like a red-hot iron ball in your belly, in your hara. As you churn, as you heat up here. He says you try to vomit it, but you cannot. It's trying to come forth. I think a more positive image that you could use is it's coming to birth. Something is trying to be born. I think of this especially because those of you in the Catholic, familiar with the Catholic liturgy this week, we've been reading Romans 8, and several times, 3 times in that glorious chapter, he speaks about groaning. He says the whole creation is groaning in labor pains, awaiting the revelation of the children of God. He says we also, with the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we await the redemption of our bodies. And then he says, and the Spirit, since we don't know how to pray as we ought, the Spirit groans within us, intercedes with inexpressible groanings. What a beautiful phrase. Inexpressible, ineffable groanings. So that fits very well with this red-hot iron ball and the 84,000 pores. Your whole being is swept up into this groaning. All right? And groaning expresses pain, the labor pain, the pain of life, the pain that has to be assumed and subsumed into this, that it costs to go through this. But the groan also, and you ladies know this better than I do, just be sure, the joy and the hope, the faith that something is being born from this. As Jesus says in John 16, a woman when she's about to give birth is sad because her time has come. But once she has given birth, out of joy she no longer remembers the pain. Which is what happens when we finally give birth to ourselves, or to Christ in us, or to Buddha in us. When we wake up, then the groanings will have paid off. And that kind of dedication will be rewarded. So he says towards the end of the commentary, suddenly you break through the barrier, you astonish heaven and shake the earth, because the whole creation groans, and you are the whole creation, you're all groaning together. So exactly what the Buddha said when he woke up. I and the great earth and the whole being simultaneously achieve the way. So you're connected to the whole earth, and the whole creation groans, and you're groaning, and the Buddha's groaning, and everyone's groaning. It's as if you snatched the great sword of General Khan, he says, who was a great Chinese general of the time. So there's a warrior energy there. There's a warrior energy, certainly. The great sword of wisdom which slices through all the illusion. He even says, you kill the Buddha if you meet him, you kill the ancient masters if you meet them, because you're the master now, you're the Buddha. All right? On the brink of life and death, which is what you feel like, you're utterly free, like the resurrected Christ. And you live with great joy. There's no nihilism. You live with great joy, a genuine life in complete freedom. Where the Spirit is, there's freedom. So that's a really good example of the type of engagement of your whole being which is involved here, the passion that's involved. The other one is column 41 with Bodhidharma. And some of you may remember this story as well, the famous story when the second patriarch, that is to say the second Chinese patriarch, Bodhidharma was the first. So his successor, his eventual successor, comes to him for the first time. Shinko went over there, and day and night, just like we just heard from Mumu, day and night, he beseeched Bodhidharma for instruction. This mirrors very much some of the stories of the early Desert Fathers, the Christian tradition in the 4th century, of a disciple going and beseeching a master with tears and cries and groans to receive him into his confidence. So the master always sat in zazen facing the wall, as is said of Bodhidharma, and paid no attention to his entreaties. On the evening of December 9th, heaven sent down a heavy snow. Shinko stood erect and unmoving. Toward daybreak, the snow reached up to his knees, above his knees. The master had pity on him and said, "You have been standing a long time in the snow. What are you seeking?" Relief of stress? No, I don't think so. Shinko in bitter tears said, tears, blood, sweat, yeah? "I beseech you, Master, with your great compassion, pray open your Dharma gate and save all of us beings." And the Master said, "The incomparable truth of the Buddhas can only be attained by eternally striving, practicing what cannot be practiced, bearing the unbearable. How can you, with your little virtue, your little wisdom, and with your easy and self-conceited mind," seeking relief of stress, "dare to aspire to attain the true teaching? There's only so much labor lost." So, and here's the punchline. Listening to the Master's admonition, Shinko secretly took out his sharp knife and cut off his own left arm and placed it in front of the Master. It's like the crucifixion, right? The Master, recognizing his Dharma caliber, told him, "Buddhas, when they first seek after the truth, give no heed to their bodies for the sake of the Dharma. You've not cut off your arm before me. I have seen sincerity in your seeking." Victory! So that's the kind of engagement we're talking about here. And goes on to say, later that, it was like, when it does open up, the mind has no form, pervades the whole universe, just as we're saying, the whole creation is groaning, and is vividly working right here in front of you. So that's that's just an amazing testimony to the kind of dedication that's required. And talking about pursuing wholeheartedly without reservation, that should be, I speak about our whole life. Our whole life is our practice. This enters the realm of vocation that I referred to a second ago. There has to be passion in your life. Find something you're passionate about and do it. If you don't have a job or a career that you're passionate about, well, then change it. It's not, life is too precious. I like Frederick Buechner, who I read long ago, said that your vocation is where your passion meets the world's need. So find something you're passionate about that also corresponds or responds to a need in the world today of service that's required, and do that. That's when your passion corresponds to the world's need. That's a true vocation. And yes, follow your bliss, follow your deepest desire. As I often say, your deepest desire is God's will, to speak in Christian terms for a moment. Your deepest desire is God's will for you, but you have to go down and find that deepest desire. You have to find that true nature in order to be able to discern that, in good old St. Ignatius terms. So your whole life should be passionate in that way. And then he says, a life of passion happens when an emotional nature, an awakened nature, meets a consuming vocation. So that's when a passionate life happens. Now this is interesting. Another trait that marks them, passionate people, is that they have high levels of both vulnerability and courage. Both vulnerability and courage. I think that's really insightful and really important. I remember speaking once with Roshi Kennedy about why is it that some people seem to practice for years and years and nothing seems to happen. Is it just that their natures are too placid? Are they temperamentally just too easygoing? Nothing happens? And how does that work? Is that what the issue is? Or is it really a lack either of vulnerability or courage? Now, you might find in guys, especially in men, courage, the warrior spirit, and you're going to sit, and you're going to achieve something, and you're going to gain something. Of course, that's not enough vulnerability. And I found, and one can find certainly, perhaps examples in women, but it can happen with anyone where they have no vulnerability, but it's not the courage to jump into it. Not the courage to let go into the vulnerability. Maybe they've been too traumatized in their lives by whatever, so they can't really let go into that abyss of mystery, into that the great doubt and the great faith, and that's required. So, putting it together, what people need is the courage to be vulnerable. It requires the courage to be really vulnerable. To be able to let go, to let the bottom fall out of the bucket, to jump into the abyss, to jump off the 100-foot pole, to use another koan image. And that requires passion. The passion of being able to take that risk, or, as he says a few lines later, to attach yourself to something you value supremely but don't fully control. To be passionate is to put yourself in danger. To be truly yourself is to put yourself in danger. Certainly Jesus did. The Buddha did. And if we don't put ourselves in danger, inside and outside, when the time comes, well, we won't get very far, and we certainly won't discover who we are, and we won't be passionate people. And he says that the courage can take two forms. People who have passion have the courage to dig down and play with their issues. See, that's what people are afraid of. That's what we also maybe are afraid of to start with. The issues are going to come up, the unconscious is going to be unloaded, the dragon's going to come out of the cave, whatever you want to talk about it. Since Sensei Rei Sassetti, who's his Dharma successor, Roshi, who's a therapist, puts it this way: dance with your demons. You have to learn to dance with your demons. In other words, engage, explore, have the courage to go down into the cave with the dragon and make friends with the dragon, or at least harmonize the dragon, etc. Discover ultimately the dragon's you anyway. Don't be so afraid of yourself. So he says there are certain core concerns and tender spots that preoccupy us through our life. We have to be able to go down into them. And passionate people often discover themselves through play. Very good. There has to be this playful spirit to do it. That not nihilistic, that faith in the goodness of life, in the joy of life, in the power of life, in the passion of life that's essentially good. You play with it. So that's the dancing part, the dancing with the demons. So you're not just, if you can't dance with the demons, well then take your pill for depression and that's it. But if you've got the passion to live your life, well then dance, with the dragon. And if you get burned, okay. You won't get through life without being burned. In case you haven't found that out already. And finally, people with passion have the courage to be themselves with abandon. So finally, they don't care what other people think. Clearly, Lady Gaga fits that. But Jesus does. Don't care what people think about them. Now, that could be an arrogant kind of thing as well, but for a person who's enlightened, who's found the path, you're going to have plenty of enemies out there. Look at Gandhi, Martin Luther King. But you are yourself. You have the courage to go through all that to become yourself, to finish yourself, and to become who you really are. So of course, in the radiance and the power of that, you're going to have the courage to be yourself, no matter what people think. So that's another feature. That's why passionate people, realized people are often so radiant and stand out because. Well, that's who you are. When you're radiant, you stand out when you become your true self. Every single one of us, every single one of you. So he concludes with the question, and I do too. Who would you be, and what would you do if you weren't afraid? Fear didn't count for so much the energy of our life. Who would you be? What would you do? if you weren't afraid. So let's sit with that.